All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our the Reading League of Virginia chapter event. I am Susan Campbell, serving as president of our Virginia chapter. And so we're excited tonight to have so many with us, both panelists and those who want to come and hear about all the great things that are happening in our Commonwealth. I was a little delayed in getting started because I was so enthralled with trying to read all of the bios, although I've read them before tonight. But it's just wonderful to know all the diversity we're going to have to hear from tonight, from the different positions that people hold to the different counties that they work in. Our board here at the Reading League, or at our chapter of Virginia, you can see we try to represent across the Commonwealth as well too. Our mission, our vision for our chapter is to make sure that every educator is prepared to implement evidence-based practices to meet the diverse profiles of all students, with the goal of becoming skilled lifelong learners. And that's why we're all here tonight. We want our children to be skilled and to love reading for their entire life. So thank you for that. Tonight, we're hoping that our event will help support educators to implement evidence-based practices and bring together all stakeholders. Again, we have folks tonight from Orange County, Virginia Beach, Fairfax, Loudoun, Charlottesville City, Frederick County, Prince William County. I hope I'm not forgetting any. There could be more. So we are, all across the Commonwealth trying to implement evidence-based practices in literacy, again, to have lifelong learners. I want to send out a special thank you, or say a special thank you, to our activities committee for coming up with this great idea and organizing everything tonight. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jen Sassano, who serves on our activities committee. So thank you, Jen, and take it away.
Thank you, Susan, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. So as Susan was sharing, tonight we are here to learn from each other about the incredible literacy work that's already been done here in Virginia ahead of the curve as we prepare to implement the VLA. Through some spark conversations tonight, we're going to hear from people who have used their own individual roles to transform literacy instruction into scientifically based practices in their school divisions. These folks didn't wait for a law telling them they had to do it. In many ways, they didn't even wait for permission to change anything. They just looked at their literacy data, knew something had to be done, and made the choice to do better because they knew better. They chose to put children, our collective future, ahead of adult comfort with the norm. They chose to learn more about the science of reading and how to ensure every student can be a literate student. So this is a large conversation. And tonight, as you saw in the bios, we have a large group of contributors, some of whom will be sharing aloud on the panel, and some of whom will continue to contribute in the chat. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge each of them as we get started. So we have Marissa Miranda, Principal, Glenkirk Elementary from Prince William County Schools, Tim Sparbaney, Principal, Trisha Furtek, Reading Specialist, Elaine Thompson Elementary, Loudoun County Public Schools, Lori Mercer, Principal, Aaron Savage, Special Education Teacher, Caroline Schneider, First Grade Teacher, Hovatter Elementary, Loudoun County Public Schools, Monica Weaver, Coordinator of Humanities, Lee Finger, Principal, Locust Grove Elementary, Orange County Public Schools, Carrie Leetsma, Education Specialist, Tara Hewen, Equity Specialist, Fairfax County Public Schools, Christy Domenico, Principal, Cynthia Petty, Instructional Coach, Jenna Rinker, Instructional Coach, Middletown Elementary, Frederick County Public Schools, Danielle Colucci, Senior Executive Director of Elementary Schools, Virginia Beach Public Schools, Stephanie Tatel, K-12 Literacy Coordinator, Summer Thompson, Principal, Megan Greenwood, First Grade Teacher, Lindsay Kamadi, Reading Specialist, Deborah Johnson, Instructional Coach, Charlottesville City Public Schools. So in less than an hour, you will get to know each of these individuals as educators, literacy leaders, and why you want to know even more about their practices. However, we know that there are lots more impactful educators out there in Virginia than we could possibly invite to be on a panel, and that the topics that we'll discuss tonight resonate with everyone that's here. So please feel free to use the chat. To keep this conversation dynamic, chime in the chat with your thoughts, questions, connections, and experiences throughout this session. We really, truly want to hear from everyone. The session will be recorded, and the chat will help us to connect with each other further and possibly drive future events. So let's get started. Each of you were invited because we have personally witnessed fantastic things in your buildings that we would like to spotlight and celebrate. To grow these bright spots, could you please introduce yourself by sharing something you're currently celebrating in your school? And to start us off, we'll have Marissa.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Marissa Miranda. I am the proud principal at Glenkirk Elementary in Gainesville, Virginia, in Prince William County. A success I would love to share is that literacy remains at the forefront of all of our conversations at Glenkirk, and there is a bit of excitement for even the changes that are coming with the VLA.
Thanks, Marissa. Tim?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Tim Sparbaney, and I am the proud inaugural principal at a brand new elementary school in Loudoun County called Elaine Thompson Elementary School. One of the things that we're proud to be celebrating is, as a new school, we felt it was a perfect opportunity to roll out evidence-based practices for a new literacy program. So we hit the ground running. Our staff is on board, our students are on board, our community is on board, and we are already seeing tremendous gains in literacy. So we're really excited about where we're going.
Thanks, Jim. How about you, Monica? Oh, there she is.
Okay, I was having trouble unmuting. We are in Orange County, we're celebrating the instructional transitions that we're seeing teachers making in response to scientifically based reading professional development that we have provided. And teachers have adjusted their lessons, instructional delivery, and use of data, especially progress monitoring data, to guide their instruction. And the most exciting part is watching the teachers' excitement when they share the changes that they're seeing in that data.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Monica. And Carrie in Fairfax.
In Fairfax, we have a lot to celebrate. We are excited how our administrators, our teachers, our staff have really joined together in our plan, our equitable access to literacy plan that came from our partnership with our community members from the NAACP and DDVA. And we have put the science of reading at the forefront of this work, and we're starting to see real shifts in our practices and shifts in our data, and people excited to learn about reading. And we're just seeing this, I said, we're past the tipping point. It has started to take hold across the district. So that's what we're celebrating right now.
Awesome. You all truly, truly are. And I'm sure it's because of those partnerships. So let's dive into our why. Why did you become interested in or involved in science-based reading practices? So think about what led you to this direction and why you feel it's valuable work to engage in. We'll go ahead and start with Virginia Beach. Danielle.
Good evening, everyone. It's really an honor to be here with all of you. You're so passionate, and it's exciting to be in the same room with everyone. I think, like many here tonight, after reading the bios and some in the chat, I've served in many diverse roles across several states, from teacher to reading interventionist to principal and central office administrator. And in all of those roles, I found myself constantly trying to grow my practice and figure out what kids needed to get over that obstacle in the area of math and literacy in elementary schools. And the more experience I gained, the more clear it became to me that high quality literacy instruction really is such a key, not only to academic access and success, but to the development of a student self-concept and even belonging in school. And so I became very interested in learning as much as I could personally. And then, of course, wanted to support others in that journey around me. So I began to grow my own practice personally and learn alongside teachers and specialists. And I felt like that not only was super humbling, and the more I learned, the more I felt I didn't know, and the more I needed to learn. And so it's really ongoing, and it's a long journey. But I felt that going through that and making that a goal would enable me to support that work in schools. And fortunately, it's a passion of many in Virginia Beach, and have a lot of support through our specialists and our administrators in the division. So the process is definitely ongoing.
Thank you, Danielle, for being here and representing such a large school division in our state. And Charlottesville, Stephanie?
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Steph Tatel, and I'm the K-12 Literacy Coordinator in Charlottesville City Schools. And I have an amazing team here with me. And I would say that our why is that literacy is a lever for equity, and it's a matter of public health. The stakes are so high. We're talking about our children. We're talking about their future. We're talking about their future families. And so we need to use the best practices that are grounded in the right research for our students.
Thank you, Steph. How about Tim in LCPS?
All right, good evening again, everyone. So when I was talking with Jen about this originally, I think she could see sort of the passion that I have for this. It's personal to me. It really is. This work is personal. So I have 5 children, and all of whom have either gone through public schools or are currently going through public schools. And many of them have really struggled with reading. And when we think about why they've had their struggles, you look just at the foundational pieces that they were missing their entire academic career. And then just as a father watching my kids struggle with something that I'm so passionate about in education is really hard to watch. So this year, when I was given the opportunity to open a brand new school, I thought this would be the perfect time to really go all in on evidence-based reading practices. And I'm fortunate enough to have my youngest child as my son, and I brought him to my school for this reason, because I could see the kind of work that we were going to do and the team that we were putting together. And I felt like I could actually see and have some voice in what my child was actually going to learn, and to make sure that he would get as much as we could fit in 1 year, the foundational pieces that are going to help him be successful for the rest of his academic career. Now, I've never been able to do that with any of my children before, but when I have this opportunity, he was perfectly doing fine. He was fine in his old elementary school. They were fine people. They were good-hearted. But he was not getting what he needed. And if I was going to produce or implement a brand new program, a literacy program in our school, I needed to be able to look parents in the face and say, I brought my own son here to this school for this reason. I'm so passionate about that, and I believe in the work that we're doing here. So if I would bring my own child here and feel comfortable with my own child, I know your child will be successful as well. And that message really does resonate with folks when they know that when I look at education, I look at this through the lens of being a parent first, and then an administrator or an educator second. And what we have done, and what I have done personally and professionally as a principal, has been a travesty to so many kids in our area. I feel like this is the opportunity to really turn course, really make a huge, significant difference in the lives of actual people, real life in front of you. And we have nearly 900 kids in our elementary school, and we're trying to impact every single one of them so that they have success moving forward, my own child included.
Thank you, Tim. And your level of investment and commitment has been clear throughout that first year. Marissa.
That work?
Yep, you're on.
Oh, I don't want to follow Tim anymore with his powerful speeches. So I'm going to go before him. So really, our why at Glenkirk really started. It's funny because I joke about it a lot that there was some good that came out of COVID. We were faced with that learning loss. It was looking at us in the face, and we had these funds coming at us, and I could do anything to avoid talking about masks and quarantine. So we really dug into the data and what were we going to do. So we used COVID really as a catalyst for change. We saw that the writing was on the wall. We had some resources within our building, teachers that had already been trained, that had partnerships already established with TTAC from George Mason. So we reached out. As luck would have it, we had the ability to get the resources in. We started, this is our year 2 of full PD for all of K-5 teachers. And it really just started a culture of learning and changing and doing something about it instead of just kind of throwing our hands up and being like, oh, well, they're going to lose that. I'm thrilled to say that our PALS data alone showed that we gained back and got back to those pre-pandemic levels pretty quickly after last year, just fully implementing. So we're excited to see what this year brings. So I would say a lot of our why came from, being faced with a grim reality, but we had very little time in order to make that up.
Thank you, Marissa. And it has been a pleasure to get to see you in action as the instructional leader in your building with those teachers and all of the knowledge that you all have invested in. We're going to transition to our next question. So we're going to think about implementation now, because we're all going to be on this journey here in the very near future. And people want to know how, and they want to know success stories, like what worked for you all who have already engaged in this. So how did you go about implementing evidence-based practices in literacy? What was your entry point, and what path did you take from there? And then if you could, what do you think are a few of your next steps? And we'll toss this one back to Danielle.
Okay, so literacy has always been a huge focus, as it has been in all elementary schools. And a few years ago, many of our reading specialists and administrators and teachers were really actively engaging in the emerging research around the science of reading and evidence-based literacy. And a lot of questions were being asked, and a lot of excitement was really involved in that. And so we began really looking to Moats and Kilpatrick and reflecting on where we were and the data that we had, and began to strategically plan ahead for what might we change and enhance. And so all that learning combined with that passion to meet our students' needs, we looked at our curriculum and assessment and the professional learning that we were offering, and began to make some adjustments to all of those things. And since then, we've continued to engage in structured literacy, professional learning. Our reading specialists have been instrumental, passionate teachers, working so hard to acquire those new skills and support each other, and the administrators alongside them. So again, I'll repeat that it is a journey, and that strategic planning has been really important. And I think it will continue to be important, especially with the changes coming with the Virginia Literacy Act, so that we can balance the demands and challenges that our teachers and administrators face in schools to keep that momentum going and increase student achievement in the end.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Danielle. I know we have seen that around the state, that the places where internal capacity has really been built to a level of sustainability, it has been that strategic action plan type of approach that involves, multiple different stakeholders and really having a clear, consistent vision and an action plan. So I'm so glad that you shared that. And at the school level, I know you've had some action planning in Frederick at Middletown as well. And so Frederick, can you tell us a little bit about how you all got started?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Cindy Petty from Frederick County, Middletown Elementary. And during our 2021-22 school year, we began implementing systematic and explicit phonological awareness instruction in our kindergarten through second grade. That was one manageable piece that we began with, while at the same time having our coaches learn about the science of reading practices in the background. Our Title I teacher had been using phonological awareness instruction as part of her intervention groups. And while the data revealed success, there was little application by students beyond her walls. The general education teachers didn't fully understand it or how to support it. So our leadership team at Middletown created a plan to begin instruction in our primary classes supported by coaching cycles. Assessment data initially indicated that our students did not have a good understanding of phonological awareness, but by the end of the year, the majority of students showed significant growth in those skills. While this step helped us achieve a major milestone, we knew that phonics instruction was our next leap. So our county offered some spots for teachers to participate in a structured literacy PD course. We had a handful of teachers who had already completed the same training, and they started implementing direct phonics instruction and strategies with students. Upon seeing student growth, our leadership team encouraged all of our kindergarten through second grade teachers to sign up for training the following year. Additionally, we realized we couldn't wait another year or more for everyone to be trained, so we started brainstorming ways that we could shift literacy mindsets in our building. This spawned the realization that we needed to have something for our teachers to use to guide their instruction. We needed a plan for science of reading instruction. We could not assume that our teachers knew what progression to use, and we wanted to have consistency. So we started small with developing some keywords for each alphabet letter to be used school-wide, as well as a verbal path for the handwriting of letters. It was then we realized we needed more things in order to be successful in implementing science of reading in our building. We needed a phonics scope and sequence for our kindergarten through third grade teachers to follow. We needed phonics lesson plans components. We needed teaching routines to support the lesson components to include read words. We needed our teachers to have access to decodable books and passages. We needed support from experts. And we wanted a cohort that could pilot our implementation while reflecting and providing feedback on instruction and the ongoing development of our scope and sequence. At that time, we sought guidance from TTAC, and we collaborated with them in developing the scope and sequence for our building. TTAC steered us to resources and guided our process while allowing us to continually ask questions and reflect, so that we came to develop our own unique research-based scope and sequence that is aligned to the state standards intended to specifically meet the needs of students at our school. Currently, in our 22-23 school year, we are continuing to reflect and adapt our scope and sequence based on the feedback from our cohort teachers who are implementing it. The first half of the year, we were very purposeful in providing professional learning on each component of our phonics lesson plan, and we use coaching cycles to support our teachers in the implementation of each one. During the second half of this year, our focus has transitioned to syllable types and syllable division so that students can be successful with reading and spelling multisyllabic words. We continue to plan with our cohort teachers and support them in their phonics instruction. And looking ahead to our 23-24 school year, we're planning to expand our phonics instruction beyond our cohort group and share phonics and syllabication with our upper grades.
Wow. You all, I mean, I can attest, I've sat in some of your CLTs and your literacy committee meetings. You all have just given us a high level view of a tremendous amount of detailed work you've done, and we thank you for that. What really stands out to me is the fact that you started with a pilot and you grew it in your building. You have scaled up so nicely, and although you were receiving a lot of the professional learning from others, through this process, you've been trained as coaches and you have a whole PD plan laid out for next year based on the feedback and the observations that you've experienced in your building with your specific teachers. So thank you. Thank you for all of that. And I know another division that's really done a lot of this work in PLCs has been Charlottesville. So they're going to talk a little bit about that.
Hi, yes. Steph Tatel again here from Charlottesville. Oh, sorry, Megan, were you going to talk? Oh, we're both spotlighted. This is so exciting. All right, well, I'm going to quote Megan. I'm going to quote Lindsay. So our spark really was in 2019 reading the original Emily Hanford articles. And I think I know Lindsay Comedy is here with us, and she was part of that group where we were reading those, and all of us kind of had like heart attacks about what we were doing. And so I would say that was really our spark. And from there, we kind of designed our mission and our vision. And that coincided really nicely with the literacy summits from the BDOE. And one of the things that Lindsay said, she's an elementary school reading specialist, that she just really felt like she had to make major changes. She'd seen students struggle, and when she started to really dig into science-based practice, she realized that there wasn't a choice but to do it to make a difference for kids. And I think one of the things that she said that I really liked was for her, part of this learning has been about learning how to not put a ceiling on students' learning. We used to be very stuck in these levels of reading or the word study stages. And so really thinking about how every student has the opportunity to access grade level material. And so then we built on that, and we really dug into letters, thanks to Kim at the state. Really, we're in our third year of letters. And so really just trying to get everybody on board with letters. And that's kind of created its own snowball, and especially when teams go through it together. So Megan's team, for example, was one of those teams that went through it together as a first grade team with their reading specialist and ESL teacher, and even with their principal at the time. And so one of the things that Megan has said is just the work in PLCs kind of keeps it moving. So that planning together along with the reading specialist, implementing instruction and ongoing assessment. In fact, I was with her team today and got to see some of that. So they're still doing it. In fact, her team is taking letter 2 now. And then along with that, we created an implementation team, because at the same time we had a new resource. And then somebody else said about using COVID as we kind of ripped the Band-Aid off COVID. We kind of took advantage of COVID and just jumped right in and continued to build with creating kind of a long-term plan that included how we were going to use our resource, because we have to be smarter than our resource. And then I would say our next steps are it's really coming up with ways to have ongoing sustainable PL for teachers at different levels. And as we have right now, we're in a place where we're just going to have a lot of turnover with teachers. So we need to figure out how to train them up fast to do this work. And then a second thing is really thinking about how this pertains, especially to, we have a lot of level 1 and 2 English learners, and especially as they come in the upper grades, and how can we serve them better? Thinking about the science of reading. And then the last thing, and then I'll be quiet, is we're thinking a lot about our writing instruction, our writing scope and sequence, and how we can do more to integrate with social studies and science.
Oh, wow. I love those next steps. I think a lot of folks on the panel and just across the state are looking at those next steps of integration across the content and writing. Thank you. Steph, that was great. And how about Fairfax? You guys had several entry points in scaling up across a massive division.
So that, we, it's an interesting way that we came to this work in, there was a public letter from the NAACP to our leadership about our literacy practices. And, they called us out. And that's one of those things, like sometimes you're moved to make changes, sometimes others move you. It was absolutely the push that we needed. And I am very grateful for them because we have been able to make some really massive changes with their support. But we are a really large district. We have 222 schools, close to 30,000 employees. And so when we think about making a massive shift, especially with practices that were so ingrained, it's pulling multiple levers. Like there's constant levers or plates in the air. And I have to name Dr. Donna McConnell, who is with us, came in as our elementary language arts coordinator. And I have never seen anyone like hit the ground running like she did and just like boom, 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 boom. These are the things that we're going to do. And so the main levers that when we're looking at entry points about how we made this shift, it's instruction, like what were we going to do? And at the same time, this letter hit, and then there was COVID, and we were supposed to be going through a textbook adoption. And so like right in the middle of that, it's like our views on pedagogy and instruction totally shifted. And we didn't have any materials at that point. So she's like, we're going to write lesson plans for K2 in structured literacy because we didn't have the resources. So we provided that curriculum for teachers. As far as professional development, we looked at like multiple levels. We had to I don't want to say convince, we had to provide the why for our leadership because this is massive change. It was changing teachers, what they're teaching, but really it's, we know literacy instruction is so personal for a lot of people. And so we had to work on providing that why. Why are we making this shift to our leadership? And so that included bringing the reading league in. They did like this day long talking about what the science of reading is and change management and how to do transformational change. That was huge for our leadership to hear that. We also, for our central office members, we read Shifting the Balance, and for our building level administrators and reading specialists. And we did a book clubs around that book. We trained our central office literacy support teachers in Orton Gillingham and letters. And we have then we created a professional development for all of our teachers, and we had like 15 hours our first year that we've continued on. A big shift that we also made was changing our assessments. And because we knew that if we didn't have the right assessments in place, that we weren't measuring the right things and our instruction wouldn't line up. And so we removed certain assessments and added put other assessments in place. And so those are the major levers that we have shifted, and we're still shifting because we are so large. It's like we're going to keep, kind of going in this circle and moving forward. But that was really our big starting points.
Well, I will tell you it's paying off because I personally seen instruction in some kindergarten classrooms in Fairfax. And let me tell you, they are doing it. So I think when you really provide the resources that, like you're saying, you provided these resources at multiple levels. And that's been a commonality, I think, that everyone has shared. It's not just about the teachers. It's about the building principals and instructional leader. It's about really allowing the why to drive the work and having it be that systemic effort. So now we want to know about some transformations. So we want to see, what have you witnessed in students? What have you experienced as a leader? What data tells you that transformation is happening? Charlottesville?
I would say we are seeing kids cracking the code much more effectively and much more efficiently. And I think one of the things that we see with teachers is that teachers are really excited and they are more curious about language and literacy than I've ever seen them. In fact, Lindsay, who's here, she talks about going into a 4th grade class and kind of being there, like they keep a list of questions for her. So when she comes in, they can ask her those questions about spelling and language that they don't understand. So teachers being curious and excited, kids cracking the code, and we're looking at several data points. We're using what we're required to use for PALS. We are also using DIBELS 8, and we're using we've created a progression of a standards-based writing checklist. And then obviously all that good observational data, kid watching from principals, coaches, and teachers. And then in the upper grades, we're using MAP along with the growth assessment. And so, we are doing a lot of triangulating that data as teams. And one of our principals, Summer Thompson, is here and with her instructional coach, Deborah Johnson, and they work really hard. They're I think an example of what all of our teams are doing, which is really looking at all those data points to sort of understand kids as a whole, but also track and see the progress that they're making. And they are making growth. It's great.
Awesome. It sounds like instructional coaching. I've heard that from several people tonight. Instructional coaching and having that support was really valuable and important in helping teachers to implement those practices that are going to lead to positive student growth. Thank you, Steph. And now that was a perfect segue, actually, because now we have 2 instructional coaches that are going to share next.
Unmute myself.
So about transformations, what have you seen in students? What have you experienced?
So in our professional learning communities with our cohort that Cindy referenced earlier, we meet with the grade level teachers at least once a month, and we ask them to reflect on what is going well in the implementation of their science of reading strategies as a result of the phonics plans that they've been implementing. So these are responses directly from our teachers that are using these phonics plans. Students receiving ESL and SPED services are applying the skills acquired from whole group phonics exposure in the reading and writing, which is in addition to their service time and their small group differentiated instruction. Students are applying their phonics skills in independent writing and love finding the rule breakers as they come across them in reading. We have students that are curious about words. They're always asking questions about why words are spelled a certain way and looking for those rule breakers that don't follow the learned phonics skills. Phonics and phonological awareness are their favorite parts of the day. They even ask for it on special days. And I have to say, yesterday being Valentine's Day, I went to co-teach a phonics lesson knowing it was Valentine's Day, and they were in the middle of their party. And when they saw me come in, they were like, guys, we got to do this later. It's time for phonics. And they were ready to put their Valentines aside so they could get to work. Students that asked to write their own phonological awareness lessons and play phonological awareness teacher during recess, which speaks for itself right there. Teachers' feedback, we've seen a huge increase in student confidence, even in struggling readers. They're willing to read and participate because the code has been unlocked for them, which is huge. We're also hearing that same feedback from parents as well, that students are willing and wanting to read. When we reflect on last year, teachers who participated in the PD had no idea the growth that it would have on their students. And they love seeing how quickly students are progressing this year now that we're fully implementing it versus where we were at this time last year. Teachers are also eager to learn more and gain as much information as possible. We have teachers who are not in our cohort right now that are asking to come to our cohort meetings because they are hearing the buzz in the building and they want to know what's going on. We've had multiple parents share that their kids are wanting to read now. We had a student who was PALS ID'd in the fall for spelling and scored in the lowest spelling domain in our diagnostic screener in the beginning of the year. This December, after his explicit phonics instruction, he now scored in the highest spelling domain, which is a huge gain and speaks alone for the instruction that we're doing. Teachers are appreciative of all the resources and support that we continue to provide in the implementation of phonics. We would still work closely with all the teachers and work together as the skills progress and questions arise. Teachers are just as eager to ask questions as the students are. So we are really looking forward to expanding into next year and working with even more upper grade teachers as they're already asking us what kind of training they're going to get next year so they can implement this as well.
That's great. I love the stories you all tell about your students, and you can tell that it must be delivered with such enthusiasm and energetically and fun because the kids are loving it and that's transferring to them. And I know your PALS data reflected that growth as well. So thank you for all the amazing coaching that you provide in your building. Marissa.
So kind of to start with our students, I think, you know, like everyone said, that increased confidence that we're seeing. But overall, I think the quickest turnaround that we had seen was our students with disabilities who had already been the leaders in their classrooms with helping their teachers out. They had already been exposed to OG. So they started to do kind of a, well, wait, you guys are just learning that rule? Like I've known the Tiger rule forever. So that really changed the dynamic and the students had so much confidence. We had a presentation that we did not long ago and all of the students who shared their feedback and the parents were all students with disabilities who talked about how confident they felt now, and it didn't feel like they were doing something very different. So when it came into the tier 1 world, so that was a big transformation with the students, obviously all students getting that confidence. For our teachers, because we implemented this K-5, there was definitely an increased vertical alignment. The same language was being said. I saw way more conversations about, hey, how are you teaching blends? It seemed like when we had rolled out the scope and sequence, for a good period of time, almost 90% of the building was in blends. So there was a lot of conversation about, hey, how are you doing this? How are you teaching this? And it created a buzz in the building. And with that scope and sequence, I think they really saw that. So there was a lot of learning, a lot of conversations, and it, you know, wasn't easy for the upper grades because that was a definite mind shift. And I think we'll talk about that later, but that's been a lot of transformation. As a leader, I've learned a lot about the transformation process and what that looks like. And hearing some of you, I'm like, God, maybe we went a little too fast because, you know, just going the cohort way. But it's been wonderful. As Jen knows, I pull my own groups and just to hear them, and they're so excited about phonemic awareness, and they'll say, oh, we have to put our listening ears on first, which you would assume when they go in the principal's office, they would have their listening ears on, but now it's a special thing that they have to do. And overall, I would just say the beyond the PALS, which we're all using, we do use an advanced spelling screener as well for our 4-5 students. And that's gearing more of where we're going. If they're not doing, they're doing their morphology as well in 5th, but in 4th, they're really looking at some of those more advanced spelling features that they still need that work on. So that would be that other data piece that we're using.
Thank you. And I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, you deserve a round of virtual applause, like principal taking intervention groups in your office on a regular basis. I absolutely love it. And, you know, I think what you illustrated was a little bit of going slow to go fast, because I know we've had this conversation across several schools that when you're first learning the instructional routines and filling in gaps of knowledge from previous school years, it does feel a little bit like teaching more basic concepts than what are in the current year SOLs. But as we get over that hump every year, that's no longer going to be the case because kids will have gotten it from kindergarten on. So we've talked about a lot of bright spots and fantastic implementation. What would you say have been some lessons learned along the way as you've changed your practices from balanced literacy into science-based literacy instruction? And we'll go right back to Marissa for this one.
Sorry. I would say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, definitely being flexible. In the second year of this, it's still a lot of mind shift change. And I think, it's a lot coming at everyone, and now it is becoming so popular. So it's everything everybody sees on Instagram and everyone that they're following, and it's, am I doing the right thing? So I think being flexible with that change and being open to hearing the fear that's coming with it. So there's still tiers and CLTs and things like that. And what does this mean? So I think that's been a big eye opener and a lesson learned, just the flexibility piece.
Thank you. And Frederick, Middletown. Hi, Christy.
Hey there. All right, so at our school, the successful shift really began with having coaches that were super knowledgeable and passionate about the science of reading practices. They were prepared and ready to support the implementation with necessary resources and professional learning. The coaches that you had heard from before led phonics lesson planning with teachers. They were thinking aloud, they were guiding the process. This allowed us to be aware of where teachers were in their learning and the implementation of SOR, so that we could provide that support that was needed. Over time, this led to teachers then writing their own plans independently through that gradual release. Once the plan was written, then the coach and the teacher would work together on how's this teaching going to occur. So depending on the comfort level of the teacher, the coach might go in and model. There might be some co-teaching that had happened together, providing feedback and then reflecting with the teacher right after the lesson. These coaching cycles were absolutely a necessity in shifting our thinking at Middletown. So every month, like we said with the cohort, we would come together, we meet together, and every team member, they have to share a celebration or a success. And then also a reflection, and taking the time to do this benefits every single person a part of the team. It proves that it's a continued motivator, and it's really the why of why we are taking these steps, and it's completely changing the mindsets around instructing literacy.
I love that you take the time to celebrate those bright spots, and it has been impactful when you heard the coaches say, you have teachers who didn't sign up for the pilot who now want to be in it. So you're shining the light on those bright spots is making other people realize how well it's going and want to be a part of that. So thank you. Charlottesville.
Hi, yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of underscore a little bit of what she just talked about with coaches, and then also just that sort of ecosystem of people and the what's the word I'm looking for, the capacity that we did create and are continuing to create and need to continue to nurture, with starting with the principal, the coach, the reading specialist, and now we're really also doing a lot of collaboration with our ESL teachers and our SPED teachers. So that I think our big learning is that this shift just requires these ongoing tending to systems, and that people are making the systems go. And so that, along with that ongoing need for professional learning. And then I think the other thing is just that this shift carries so much emotion. And we have to recognize that so that teachers don't feel like they're being criticized for past practices or that they've harmed children. Of course, that's what I think when I think about, I want to go back and teach those kids again. But teachers want to do right for kids. And so I think just being really cognizant of that emotional shift that takes is really important.
Thank you. And Fairfax, I know we're running low on time, but if you could talk a little bit to us about the de-implementation, because that's something we haven't talked about yet. That's a valuable lesson.
Yes, I think that was a big lesson. You know, when you're doing transformational change, it's not additive. We can't just keep adding things onto teachers' plates and expect things to change. And so we had to de-implement certain things. And part of that, like in our district, was de-implementing the DRA, de-implementing guided reading. And it was challenging and there was a lot of pushback and there was a lot of emotions at first. And I think, you know, it was very hard the first time you go through it because it feels like you're getting, you know, all of this pushback. Are we doing, and you're like, are we doing the right thing? And our head of equity, she said, she's like, we're doing equity work. And with equity work, if you're not getting pushback, you're not really making changes. And that was that was our mantra that we kept saying, we're getting pushback because it's working and we're making real change. And so, and Donna and I would, and our team would say, we would go through the initial like pushback and like a lot of feelings and emotion, which were valid. You know, these are practices that were really ingrained in people's pedagogy. And then we would come to the other side and it would be okay. And after the first couple of times we realized, okay, we're in that initial like surge and it ended up being okay. And then people saw the value in the changes. Like when we changed our assessment practices, they're like, I can really see what the kids know and don't know. So I think what I would recommend is know that it's going to be hard and you are going to get pushback when you de-implement things. And that is, it will pay off in the end. And if you're getting pushback, it means you are making real change. So keep going.
Wow, that is really powerful advice. Thank you, Carrie. So let's talk about some of those barriers for just a couple minutes as we wrap up here. What have been some barriers and how did you navigate those? That's what people really want to know. How about Virginia Beach?
So personally, I believe it's really important to acknowledge the level of rigor in the content and the skills that have to be acquired and the time needed to acquire those skills and knowledge to be able to deliver evidence-based literacy instruction. And I think as I reflected earlier on a question asked, going through that myself really helped me to have that lens because it was humbling. And so that acknowledgement is really key to create any plan of success to navigate the barriers. So knowing the work takes time, understanding that educators and adults need to feel successful just like students, and trying to make this enjoy this learning experience. It should be something that is supported by our passion and aligned to the mission we have as educators, and constantly staying connected to that core purpose should be done intentionally. So thinking about support systems in place in a school or a division, how can PLCs support this? How can our instructional coaches support this? And being intentional about a focus on celebration of even the smallest efforts and gains that are being made, I think is key to keeping momentum and sustaining it. Providing administrators the support they need and the knowledge and resources and professional learning that will empower them to think about all of these things and create their own plans and goals that are scalable and reasonable. Consideration for all the priorities that administrators and teachers have on their plates, because this isn't the only one. And I think being really reflective about that is key to be relevant to as leaders and educators. So, and I've always believed, and I know everybody else does too, with any good planning, checkpoints and soliciting feedback and empowering those that are in the work and taking these new things on is really critical to be able to make adjustments and tweak things and provide additional layers of support as needed to accomplish all the goals we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Danielle.
Mhm.
I'm going to hop over a little bit because I want to hear about the classroom. And we have a first grade teacher, Caroline, with us from Hovatter. Can you talk to us? What do the teachers need to know? What are the barriers in practice, and how did you navigate those?
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi, I am from Hovatter and a first grade classroom teacher. So I did begin teaching during the pandemic, which was a nearly vertical learning curve in the whole language approach to reading, and found that without the science of reading in the classroom, with my support in the classroom as a teacher who was still growing in practice, that I was having a difficult time really being able to explain phonetic rules to students, grasping that curriculum and being able to deliver it in different examples and apply it and engage the students. So with the science of reading, really thinking about how we are able to account for changes that lead to student success without a systematic curriculum. How do you know what a student's success or change in intervention is really based off of? So as a teacher who has kind of been through this shift and implementing science of reading practices in the classroom, that data needs to mean something. If we're going to analyze it, it needs to be based on correctly manipulated variables. It needs to be trustworthy because it's based off of something that is, supported in science.
Thank you. And I know that you have seen lots of growth in your data since implementing. I also, if we could hear from, how about Elaine Thompson? You had some misconceptions that you brought about needing to debunk. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I am Trisha Pertek. I am a reading specialist at Elaine Thompson. And I think one of the biggest things that we had to debunk from the very beginning was just this misconception that the science of reading is phonics. I think that was a big thing within our teachers. And so it's really taking and desegregating and talking about what the reading rope actually entails, and that literature is rich, and we need to make sure that we have that language rich environment for our students, for all of our students, with layering on the best instructional practices that we can to help our students be able to decode and encode those words. And then to even layer on even more, we are now in a mindset shift with this misconception of there's a reading block and there's a writing block, and that's the time that you teach reading and writing. And so one of our big shifts right now is just talking about literacy in general within our building, and that there needs to be a direct instruction for our students to be able to learn those basics, but they need to be able to apply those basics in, like I had made in the comments earlier, literacy doesn't happen during a reading block when you're reading a book. Literacy happens all day, every day, whether you're 5 or you're 75. I mean, it's happening all around us, and you're using those skills constantly. So we're just talking about the reciprocal teaching between the reading and the writing as we're going through, and it is a mindset shift when we're talking about master schedules and creating those schedules. And instead of having a block, we're going to be looking at literacy and where do we see literacy in our classroom along with direct instruction components.
Thank you. Great job. So last question, and then we'll do our little wrap up. Some educators have had concerns that explicitly teaching phonics will take away from other areas, perhaps take away from deeper learning that results from exploratory or inquisitive based methods. And we want to know if that concern has come true in your school throughout this work. Now, in orange, Lee Finger, you are first year implementing this in your pilot in your building. And have you seen have you seen that change at all? Has that come to fruition?
Would you repeat that again, the change in?
Oh, sorry, Lee. I skipped forward too much, I think. So educators that have concerns that explicitly teaching phonics will come at the price of something, that they're having to remove deeper learning experiences from the classroom in order to focus on phonics. Have you seen that at all in your teachers implementing in the pilot?
If I have, it's been few and far between. I think working at a K2 level, there's a natural inclination or a gut feeling or an understanding of these foundational skills that are really important to setting a student up for success for lifelong literacy. And so I think I've seen the opposite of more excitement, more engagement, more questioning, more organic conversations across grade levels and within grade levels. And so, I don't know, I think it's just a natural progression, and I'm really encouraged to hear and see that we're on a pathway that hopefully will reveal or unravel itself, much like I'm hearing from others on the panel.
Thank you. And, you know, I've heard that same thing that from several panelists tonight, that that it actually leads to greater questioning and curiosity about words. So thank you. All right. So we are, you know, Lee, I just wanted you to share one other thing as we wrap up about your career as an elementary music teacher, because I just absolutely love this, coming from a building administrator, and what connection you had when you started some training in structured literacy.
I really appreciate the opportunity to share that, because I've, you know, as a principal, I'm in my 6th year here, and I have a music background. And, you know, as we work through Balance for Literacy, I always felt like I was looking from the outside in. And since we've been starting to implement structured literacy, and I've learned that, I feel much more connected with it. Because as you shared, I started, you know, my career as an elementary music teacher. And I know that language is a skill. It's a language that requires a discipline that is structured, that is systematic, in order to learn and express oneself through that language of music. And during my own master's work, I chose to do research on the effects of early musical abilities and the influence it had on early literacy development. And this gave me an opportunity to learn more about the importance of the development of the oral perception of sound as it relates to phonemic awareness and phonics. And the systematic and intentional teaching of those various elements of reading instruction has appealed to me because it really simply makes sense based on my own musical training. There's a science and an art to music, and there's a science and art to teaching reading. Musical symbols and alphabetic symbols are not taught in isolation, but are foundational in order to make sense of and find the joy of spelling, vocabulary, text comprehension. Just as someone who learns the sounds and symbols of music to more fully appreciate the pitch, the duration, musical intervals, phrasing, form, etc. The explicit and systematic teaching of phonemes and their accompanying symbols with a high rate of repetition is important to learning how to read, because it supports a foundation that helps to build context for the introduction of other elements of reading.
Awesome. I just loved how you made that connection between the foundations of early literacy and learning music. So we're going to wrap up because we're a few minutes over. If you could finish this statement in 7 words or less. Literacy is Steph. Literacy is.
Equity and a human right and a matter of public health.
Awesome. And Marissa, literacy is.
Essential to all parts of life.
Thank you. Trisha.
Literacy is the most important work right now.
Awesome. And Carrie in Fairfax.
Literacy is access to our world.
Thank you. All right. So there's a saying that goes, the true test of a person's character is what one does, even when no one is watching. And I want to thank our panelists for allowing us to see tonight what you have been doing in your own schools for students. Your character and your leadership are certainly ones that we can learn from as we move forward and bring scientifically based practices and instruction across our schools in Virginia. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everyone who joined us, and we appreciate you all participating. Have a great evening, everyone.